The runaway bride. The palace lights burned bright against the endless alien night. Inside the grand hall, golden banners waved above rows of nobles, their cold eyes fixed on the young bride. She stood silent, her silver dress heavy on her shoulders, her throat tight with fear. She was not here by choice. She was here because the council demanded it, because her family said it was duty. Her heart pounded like a war drum. The alien prince she was meant to marry sat on the throne with a proud smirk. He was powerful, cruel, and older than her by many years. He did not look at her with kindness. He looked at her as if she was a prize to be owned. She wanted to scream. But the music began to play. The priests called her forward, their voices echoing across the chamber. "Step forth, child of the stars," they commanded. She lifted her foot, but it felt like chains dragged behind her. Every step was slow, heavy, as if she was walking into a cage that would never open again. Her eyes searched the room. The guests smiled, but none of them cared about her pain. Not one friend stood for her. Not one family member stopped this cruel game. She realized she was alone, truly alone. That thought gave her courage. If no one would save her, then she would save herself. She remembered the old tunnels under the palace, tunnels she had once explored as a child. If she could reach them, she could escape. It was madness. It was dangerous, but it was her only chance. The music swelled louder. The alien prince rose, ready to claim her, but in that moment she turned. Her dress caught the light as she spun away from the priests, away from the council. Gasps filled the hall. Voices shouted her name, but she ran. Her feet pounded against the marble floor as guards gave chase. She slipped through a narrow archway and into the hidden servants' halls. The scent of dust and cold stone filled her lungs as she pushed forward. Behind her, boots thundered, "Stop her!" The bride must not leave. She ignored their cries. Her mind burned with one thought: freedom. Down twisting stairs, through damp corridors, she ran with every ounce of strength left in her body. Her breath came in sharp bursts, her hands trembling as she held her dress. Up to move faster. At last she reached the old tunnels. The stone walls dripped with water, the air colder than the palace above. Her heart leapt with hope, but her fear was greater. The guards would not stop searching. The council would not forgive her. If they caught her, they would lock her in chains until the wedding was forced. Her legs ached, but she pushed forward. The tunnels opened to the edge of the alien city. For the first time in her life, she looked out upon the dark streets where ordinary people lived. No golden banners, no royal guards, just shadows, smoke, and neon lights. The city was alive with strange voices and music from hidden corners. Alien merchants shouted, engines roared, and drunk voices filled the air. She had never been here before. To her, this world was dangerous, wild, untamed, but to her, it was also freedom. She pulled the veil from her head and dropped it into the gutter. No more chains, no more lies. She blended into the crowd, hoping no one would notice the missing bride, but her gown still glittered under the neon, and her face was known across the empire. Then she heard them, the guards shouting in the distance. They had followed her. Her stomach turned to ice as she ducked between vendors and stalls. She could not let them catch her. Not now. Not after all this. Her bare feet slapped against the wet streets as she ran. People turned to stare, some laughing, some whispering. She was a spectacle, a runaway bride in the middle of the night, and the hunters were closing in. Her lungs burned, her vision blurred. But she did not stop. She darted into a narrow alley, the smell of oil and metal stinging her nose. For a brief moment, she thought she had escaped. But when she turned the corner, she froze. 2 guards stood at the other end of the alley, blocking her path. Her chest tightened. Her legs refused to move. The soldiers raised their weapons, their eyes cold. The wedding was over. They would drag her back in chains. But then, from the shadows, a light appeared. A small yellow vehicle rolled forward, its headlights cutting through the darkness. The strange hum of its engine was unlike anything she had heard before. The vehicle stopped beside her, its door swinging open with a creak. Inside sat a human man, his hands on the wheel, his eyes steady and calm. He looked at her, then at the guards, then back at her. "Get in," he said, his voice firm but low. "If you want to live, get in now." Her heart raced. She had never spoken to a human before. Her people saw them as weak, simple, unimportant. Yet in that moment, she saw something in his eyes the prince never had choice, a chance at freedom. The guards shouted for her to stop, raising their weapons. Higher, the human leaned closer, his hand reaching toward the passenger seat. "Last chance," he said. She hesitated, her mind torn between fear and hope, and then, with one desperate breath, she stepped forward into the human's taxi. The door slammed shut, the engine roared, the taxi shot forward into the night, and the runaway bride vanished from the world she once knew. Asterisk the taxi driver. Appears the taxi roared into the night, wheels screeching against the wet stone streets. The runaway bride clutched the seat with trembling hands, her heart hammering in her chest. Behind them, the guards shouted and fired. But the strange human machine was too fast. It slipped into the maze of alleys like a shadow fleeing the moonlight. For the first time since she escaped the palace, she could breathe, but her fear did not fade. It grew heavier. She was trapped inside a metal box with a creature she had never trusted. A human. The man's eyes stayed on the road. Sharp and steady, he moved the wheel with one hand, shifting strange levers with the other. Bullets and plasma fire exploded around them, but he didn't flinch. He didn't panic. It was as if he had done this before, many times before. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice shaking. The man didn't answer, his jaw set tight. Instead, he pressed something on the dashboard, and the taxi roared even louder, the engine glowing blue. The vehicle shot forward like a beast unleashed, leaving the soldiers far behind. She pressed her back against the seat, staring at him. His face was lined with scars, his dark hair messy, his clothes simple, not royal, not noble, not wealthy, just ordinary. But there was something in his calmness that unsettled her. Finally, he spoke, his voice deep and low. "You picked the wrong night to run, princess." Her blood ran cold. He knew who she was. Her hands clenched, ready to grab the door and leap out. But the door was locked, and the streets outside were chaos. Why are you helping me?" she demanded. The man gave a faint smirk, but didn't look at her. "Because you're not the first bride who wanted to run," he said, his tone almost bitter. Her eyes widened, but before she could ask more, the taxi swerved hard. She slammed against the seat, gasping as they barely avoided a blockade. The city around them blurred with neon signs, alien towers, and smoke rising into the sky. Sirens echoed, patrol drones buzzed overhead. Searching every street, everywhere she looked, she saw danger. But the humans seemed to see only paths, hidden turns, and ways to escape. At last, they broke free of the city's main roads and slipped into the industrial district. Here, shadows ruled, and the stench of burning fuel filled the air. The man finally slowed, pulling into a forgotten warehouse with broken walls and shattered windows. The engine went silent. The sudden quiet felt heavier than the noise of the chase. The bride's chest rose and fell fast, her eyes locked on the human. He leaned back in his seat, finally looking at her. There was no fear in his gaze, only something sharper. "Now," he said calmly, "you tell me why you ran." Her throat tightened. She wanted to lie, to say she was lost, but she knew it was useless. His eyes saw through her like glass. "I was being forced," she admitted, her voice trembling, "to marry a man I don't love, a man who only wants power She shook her head, tears burning her eyes. I would rather die than belong to him. The human's expression did not change, but his silence was heavy. Finally, he muttered, "Figures." He leaned forward, resting his hands on the wheel. "You're not safe anymore. Not from your prince, not from your council, not from your family," he said. "They'll hunt you until they drag you back in chains, or until you're dead." She shivered at his words. "Then why save me?" She whispered again, her voice breaking. The man's gaze softened for the first time, though only slightly. "Because once someone saved me," he said. Then he looked away, as if the memory was a wound he did not want to open. She didn't understand him. Humans were supposed to be weak, desperate creatures, at least. That's what she had always been told. But here was one, standing against her entire empire without fear. And he had done it for her, someone he didn't even know before. She could ask more. The sound of engines thundered outside. Her heart stopped. Through the cracked warehouse walls, she saw lights sweeping across the streets. The soldiers had found him. Dozens of vehicles, armored and armed, surrounding the area. The human cursed under his breath, then started the engine. Again, the blue glow flared, lighting up the broken glass around them. He turned to her, his voice calm but sharp. "Stay down and don't look back." "Why?" she asked, panic rising in her chest. He gave her a quick glance, his eyes cold with resolve. "Because once they see what this taxi can really do, there's no going back." The warehouse doors burst open, soldiers pouring in, weapons ready. The human slammed his foot down. The taxi howled like a beast. The floor shook as the vehicle exploded forward, straight through the wall. Glass and stone shattered as they tore into the night. The guards fired, the bride screamed, and the chase began again. But this time, she realized something different. This man was not just a driver, not just a stranger. He was something far more dangerous, something her people had never warned her about. He was human, and humans did not bow. Escape through the city. The taxi blasted through the warehouse wall like a comet tearing the sky. Shards of stone and glass rained behind them as soldiers shouted and fired. The runaway bride clung to the seat, her breath caught in her throat. The human's hands were steady on the wheel, his eyes sharp and unblinking outside. The alien city unfolded like a maze of steel and neon. Towering spires glowed with blue light. Smoke rose from engines above. The streets twisted, narrow and crowded, filled with noise and shadows. But the human drove like he had memorized every path, every corner, every secret road. Behind them, armored vehicles roared, engines howling like beasts, drones cut through the air, their red lights sweeping over rooftops. The bride's heart pounded, each shot of plasma lighting the sky. "How long can we keep running?" she whispered. The human's lips curled into the faintest grin. "Long enough," he said, his voice calm. "If you trust me." The taxi swerved hard, diving into a narrow passage between two buildings. Metal scraped against stone as sparks flew. The bride gasped, but the vehicle slid through, too fast for the armored trucks to follow. Behind them, one enemy vehicle tried to squeeze in. It crashed with a deafening roar, flames swallowing the alley. The shockwave rocked the taxi, but the human didn't slow. Instead, he pressed a switch on the dashboard. Panels shifted, and the engine glowed brighter, a strange hum filling the air. The bride stared, her eyes wide. "That's not alien tech," she whispered. The man only replied, "No, it's not." The taxi shot forward, climbing up a steep ramp that led straight onto an elevated roadway. The city stretched out below them like an ocean of light and fire. Above, patrol drones swarmed, preparing to cut them off. The human leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "They want to trap us," he muttered. Then he smirked. "But they've never played with humans." He spun the wheel sharply, sending the taxi into a spin. For a heartbeat, the bride thought they would flip and fall into the abyss, but the tires gripped with unnatural strength. The taxi drifted around the corner, sliding past the drones as they fired wildly into the air. The bride pressed her hand to her chest, her lungs burning. "You're insane," she shouted. The human chuckled softly, not taking his eyes off the road. "No, I'm alive," he said, "and so are you, because you chose the right seat." But even as he spoke, more lights appeared ahead. A full blockade stretched across. The roadway armored vehicles lined up, weapons aimed directly at them. The bride's heart froze. "There's no way through," she whispered. The human's eyes darkened. "There's always a way," he said. He slammed the lever down, and the engine roared louder than ever before. The blue glow beneath the taxi burned bright like a star. The vehicle lifted. Not fully, not like a ship, but just enough to leap. The taxi soared off the roadway, rising above the blockade as plasma fire streaked below. The bride screamed, gripping the seat. For a heartbeat, it felt like they would crash into the lower streets and shatter into pieces. But the human angled the machine perfectly. They landed hard on another street below, sparks flying as the tires screamed, and then they were racing again, leaving the blockade behind. In smoke and fire, the bride turned to him, her voice breaking. "Who are you really?" she demanded. The human's eyes stayed on the road, his jaw tight. "Just a driver," he said. But there was weight in his words, a weight that told her it was a lie. Sirens wailed behind them. The council would not stop, not until she was caught. And yet, sitting in this strange human's taxi, she felt something she had never felt before. Not just fear, not just danger, but the taste of freedom. Suddenly, a loud crack split the air. The back of the taxi sparked, smoke rising. They had been hit. The bride panicked. "They'll destroy us." But the human only gritted his teeth. "Not tonight," he growled. He pressed another switch, and steel plates slid out over the windows, shields humming with energy. The taxi was no longer just a car. It was a fortress they sped deeper into. The heart of the city, leaving the palace far behind. But the chase was not over. From the rooftops, snipers tracked them, their scopes glowing red. From the sky, drones swarmed like angry insects. And on the ground, more armored vehicles hunted. The human's eyes narrowed. "We can't outrun them forever," he muttered. He glanced at her, his gaze sharp. "You want to live? Then you need to trust me completely." Her breath caught. She nodded slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "I trust you." His hand tightened on the wheel. "Good," he said. "Because the real escape starts now." The taxi dived into the Undercity, a dark labyrinth where no law held power. The neon faded, replaced by shadows, broken machines, and whispers of danger. The bride shivered. But the human's expression did not change. He had chosen this path, a path only he knew how to survive. Behind them, the city howled with alarms and fire. Ahead, the unknown waited. And for the first time, the alien bride realized the truth. Her life was no longer in the council's hands. It was in the hands of one human taxi driver, a man the galaxy would soon learn to fear. Asterisk secrets in the taxi. The taxi thundered deeper into the Undercity. Above, the neon towers of the alien world faded, swallowed by shadows and smoke. Here, broken lights flickered weakly, and the air stank of rust and oil. This was no place for royalty, no place for brides. And yet here, she was hidden inside a strange human's machine. Her heart still raced from the chase, but another feeling now burned stronger than fear. Curiosity. This man was not ordinary, not just a driver. Every time she looked at him, she felt the weight of secrets behind his calm eyes. "Why here?" she whispered, staring at the cracked streets and abandoned factories. The human's hands gripped the wheel tightly. "Because they won't follow us down here," he said, his voice low. "They're afraid of this place, but I'm not." His words chilled her. He spoke like a man who had lived in the shadows for a long time. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You fight like a soldier. You drive like you own these streets. But you say you're just a driver." The man's jaw clenched, his silence louder than words. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, finally, he sighed, his voice rough. "Once, I was a soldier," he admitted. Her eyes widened. "A soldier? For humans?" "Yes," he said simply. "But that was a long time ago." She leaned closer, her eyes locked on him. "What happened?" she asked softly. The human didn't look at her, his gaze fixed on the road. "I lost everything," he said. The words hung in the air like heavy chains. He didn't explain, didn't give details. But his voice carried pain she could feel in her bones. Before she could ask more, the taxi jolted suddenly. The man swerved, dodging a shadow that darted across the road. From the alleys, strange figures emerged, their eyes glowing in the dark. Not soldiers, scavengers, thieves, creatures that lived in the forgotten places. They surrounded the taxi, pounding on its metal sides, shouting in alien tongues. The bride gasped, shrinking back, but the human only pressed another switch. The taxi's panels hummed, and a wave of electric sparks flashed across its surface. The scavengers screamed as the shock threw them back into the shadows. The road cleared, and the taxi sped forward again. The bride stared in shock. "That's Forbidden's tech," she whispered. "Her people banned such weapons." "How do you have it?" The man glanced at her, his eyes dark. "Humans build what they need," he said coldly. "Because no one gives us anything." His words cut deep into her mind. She had always heard that humans were desperate, weak, always begging for scraps. But this man? He was not weak. He was dangerous, clever, and unafraid. And his machine, this taxi, was more than a vehicle. It was a weapon. Finally, the taxi slowed, pulling into a cavern-like shelter beneath the city. The man shut off the engine, and silence fell. For the first time since she met him, she could hear her own breathing again. But the silence carried a heavy tension. She knew he was hiding more. She turned to him, her eyes fierce. "You saved me." "But I don't even know your name," she said. The man's lips pressed into a thin line. "Corin," he answered finally. "Just Corin," she repeated the name softly. It felt strange, sharp, yet strong. "Why risk your life for me, Corin?" she asked. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." His eyes lifted to hers, and for the first time, she saw the storm inside them. "I told you," he said, "someone once saved me, and I couldn't repay them." He looked away, his hands tightening on the wheel. "But maybe, by saving you, I can repay the debt." Her chest tightened at his words. This man carried ghosts, chains of his own past, and yet here he was, risking everything for her. She wanted to ask more, but before she could, a sharp sound echoed outside, the hum of engines. The bride's blood ran cold. "They found us," she whispered. Corin's eyes narrowed, his calm returning like steel. "No," he said, his voice steady. "They followed us." The cavern lights flickered as shadows filled the tunnels. Dozens of soldiers moved in, their weapons glowing. The bride pressed back against the seat, her voice shaking. "There's too many." Corin reached down beneath the seat, pulling out a long black weapon, his movements smooth, practiced, deadly. He glanced at her, his eyes sharp as fire. "Stay inside. Whatever happens, don't open the door." Before she could argue, he stepped out of the taxi. The sound of boots and weapons filled the air. The bride's breath caught as she watched him stand alone against an army. For the first time, she understood something terrifying. This was no ordinary man. This was no ordinary driver. This was a human warrior. And the galaxy had lied about what humans could do. The soldiers raised their weapons, shouting orders. Koren stood tall, his weapon ready, his gaze unshaken, and then, in a voice that carried through the tunnels, he spoke, "You picked the wrong night to hunt me." The air trembled with silence, and then violence exploded. Asterisk, the chase across worlds' blinding flashes lit up the cavern as Koren moved. The soldiers fired in waves, their weapons filling the air with burning light. But the human was faster, sharper, every step. Every shot he took was precise. One by one, soldiers fell, their cries echoing through the tunnels. The bride pressed her hands against the window, her breath shallow. She had never seen anything like this. One man, just one, holding back an army. His movements were not wild or desperate. They were calculated, like he had already lived this fight before. But there were too many. Dozens became hundreds, shadows flooding the cavern. Koren fought like fire, but even fire could be smothered. The bride's chest tightened with dread. He couldn't win, not alone. Then Koren slammed his hand against the side of the taxi. A command she didn't understand. The engine roared alive, glowing brighter than before. Panels slid open along the vehicle's sides, and from within, hidden cannons unfolded, their barrels gleaming with blue light. The taxi was no taxi at all. It was a war machine disguised as something ordinary. When the cannons fired, the cavern shook. Explosions tore through the soldiers' ranks, scattering them in panic. Koren leapt back inside, his face lit by the glow of fire. "Hold on," he muttered. The bride barely had time to scream before the taxi roared forward, straight through the crumbling wall. They burst out into the open night. The city far behind, the stars wide above. The taxi lifted, its hidden thrusters firing. The ground fell. Away as they shot into the sky, the bride's stomach lurched as she gripped the seat. This is a ship?" she gasped. Koren's voice was steady. "It's both. That's why no one sees it coming." The city shrank beneath them, glowing like a dying ember. But the chase was not over. From the atmosphere, sleek alien ships descended, their wings sharp like blades, their voices crackled over comms, filled with command and cruelty. "Return the bride, or be destroyed." The bride shivered, her hands trembling. "They'll never stop," she whispered. Koren's eyes narrowed. "They'll learn," he said. The ships fired, streams of plasma slicing through the sky. Koren twisted the controls, the taxi ship spinning between beams of light. The bride was thrown against the seat, her heart hammering. She had flown in council cruisers before, but never like this. The human flew as if he was part of the machine. Every move reckless yet perfect, every near miss intentional. One alien fighter swooped in close, locking onto them. Koren smirked. "Wrong move," he muttered. He slammed a switch. The taxi dropped like a stone, the fighter overshooting. And Koren pulled back, the cannons firing. The alien ship exploded into burning fragments across the stars. The bride's eyes widened in awe. Humans were supposed to be weak, but this man fought like he was born in battle. Like the stories she had once dismissed as myths, more ships closed in, forming a net across the sky. Koren gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his forehead. "They're trying to box us in," he muttered. "Where will we go?" she asked, fear breaking her voice. Koren's jaw tightened. "Off-world," he said. Before she could question, he slammed the thrusters. The stars blurred as the taxi broke through the last layer of atmosphere, and space unfolded before them, vast and endless. The bride gasped, her eyes wide. She had left her world behind, truly behind, for the first time in her life. She was free of the palace, the council, the chains, but her freedom came at a cost. Dozens of alien warships now surged after them, their lights fierce across the void. The human adjusted the controls, his gaze sharp as steel. "Once we leave this system, they'll call reinforcements," he said. Her voice shook. "Can we escape them?" He smirked faintly. "That depends," he said, "on how badly they want to catch us, and how much I'm willing to show them." His words made her shiver. She realized he had not yet revealed the full power of his machine, or himself. This was only the beginning. The warships fired in unison. Beams of plasma carved across the G. Dark, the bride braced, certain they would be torn apart, but Corin twisted the ship at the last second, diving between enemy fire. The explosions lit the void like lightning. Her breath caught as she realized something. He wasn't just flying to escape. He was leading them, pulling them exactly where he wanted them to be. The stars shifted, and before her eyes, a massive rift appeared, a wormhole unstable, glowing with violent energy. The bride froze. "No one flies through that," she whispered. Her people considered such rifts death traps. Corin's eyes gleamed. "Exactly," he said, and he aimed straight for it. The alien ships shouted warnings across the cones. They pulled back, unwilling to risk it. But the taxi ship did not slow. The bride's hands clutched the seat, her voice a scream. "We'll die." Corin's voice was calm, almost cold. "Not tonight." The wormhole swallowed them whole. Light shattered, space bent. The taxi shook like it would tear apart. But Corin's hands never wavered, and with one final surge of power, they vanished. From their pursuers' sight, asterisk the humans stand, the wormhole spat them out into blackness. The taxi ship rattled and shook, its panels sparking, alarms blaring across the dashboard. The bride clung to her seat, her heart hammering. She thought they would be torn apart, but somehow they survived. Stars stretched out before them, cold and endless. For a heartbeat, silence filled the cabin. Only their breaths and the hum of the failing engine remained. Then Corin leaned back, his hands loosening on the wheel. "We made it," he muttered, his voice rough. The bride let out a shaky gasp. "Made it? We almost died." But before Corin could reply, new lights appeared in the distance. Not starships, dozens of alien cruisers emerging from hyperspace, their weapons already glowing. Her blood turned to ice. They followed us," she whispered. Corin's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing. "They won't stop." "Not until you're back in chains?" The bride's chest tightened. Her people's power stretched across the galaxy. They had fleets, armies, endless resources. And here she was, trapped in a damaged human craft with one man hopeless. But Corin did not look afraid. He looked ready. "Stay down," he said, his voice sharp. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice trembling. Corin reached under his seat and pulled out a case. Inside, strange weapons gleamed, human designs, crude yet fierce. He loaded one with practiced hands, the sound heavy in the silence. "Fight," he said simply. The bride shook her head in disbelief. "Fight? Against them? That's impossible." Corin's eyes snapped to hers. "Impossible is just a word your council made up," he said coldly. "Humans don't believe in impossible." The alien fleet spread wide, surrounding them like a cage of light. A voice boomed across the combs. "Human vessel, surrender the bride. Resist and be destroyed." The bride's hands shook as she whispered, "They'll kill us both." But Corin only smirked faintly. "Not before I make them regret it." He slammed his fist on the dashboard, and the taxi roared to life. Hidden. Panels slid open again, revealing more weapons, missile pods, cannons, and strange tech she had never seen. The bride's eyes widened. This isn't just a taxi," she breathed. "No," Corin said, his voice hard. "This is survival." The first alien cruiser fired, a massive beam cutting across the void. Corin pulled the controls, the ship twisting just enough. The beam skimmed past them, burning the stars. Then the taxi's cannons fired back. Explosions rippled across the nearest cruiser, tearing through its shields. The bride gasped. He was actually fighting them. One man, One ship against a fleet, it was. Madness beautiful, impossible madness. The aliens swarmed, their weapons raining fire, but Corrin flew like lightning. Weaving through every blast, his face was steady, his hands precise, every movement sharp, every decision instant. He was not just surviving, he was winning. The bride's chest rose and fell with each shot. Fear mixed with awe. She had grown up hearing humans were fragile. Weak, nothing but tools. But this man was rewriting everything she thought she knew. Still, the numbers pressed harder. More cruisers came, their fire filling the sky. The taxi shook violently, alarms blaring again. Sparks rained from the ceiling. The bride cried out, "We can't hold this. Corrin, we can't." But Corrin's eyes burned with fire. "Yes, we can," he growled, "because this isn't about holding. It's about showing them what humans are." His words sent a shiver through her, and then she saw it. The enemy ships hesitating, pulling back slightly. They had never seen resistance like this from one man. Their fear was growing. Corrin leaned forward, pressing another hidden switch. The taxi's core glowed brighter, humming with energy she had never felt before. "What is that?" she whispered. Corrin's voice was calm, almost cold. "Something humans never shared with your council," he said, "because power like this belongs only to the desperate." The glow expanded, wrapping the taxi in a shield of blue fire. Enemy shots struck and burned away, unable to pierce the energy. Then Corrin's cannons roared again, striking 3 cruisers at once. They exploded in bursts of flame and debris. The bride stared in shock. This is impossible." Corrin's jaw tightened. "No," he said, his eyes locked on the enemy. "This is humanity's stand." The remaining cruisers wavered, their lines breaking. For the first time, they pulled back. Fear spread through their ranks, and the bride realized the truth. One man had just forced an entire fleet to retreat. The silence after the battle was heavier than the fire. The bride's breath shook as she looked at him. "You're not just a driver," she whispered. Corrin finally looked at her, his eyes shadowed but fierce. "No," he said quietly, "I'm a survivor. And now, so are you." But deep in the dark, beyond the stars, more signals stirred. The council would not forgive this. They would send more fleets, stronger fleets. The chase was not over. It was only beginning. Asterisk freedom and a new path the stars were silent after the battle. The wreckage of alien ships drifted in the void. Glowing embers scattered across the dark. Inside the taxi ship, the alien bride sat frozen, her heart racing. She could hardly believe what she had just seen. One human, one ship against a fleet, and the fleet had run. But silence did not mean safety. Her people were powerful, relentless. More fleets would come, more soldiers, more hunters. They would not stop until she was captured, or until Corrin was dead. The bride turned to him, her voice shaking. "They'll never forgive this," she whispered. "They'll send more. Armadas. You can't fight them all." Corrin's face stayed calm, his eyes locked on the stars ahead. "Maybe not," he said quietly, "but they'll learn something tonight. Humans don't kneel. Not to councils, not to princes, not to anyone." His words struck deep inside her chest. For the first time in her life, she felt the chains of her people breaking, not because she escaped the palace, but because she had seen what true defiance looked like. The taxi hummed as it drifted into empty space. Damaged panels sparked. The engine groaned. Corrin worked it. The controls steady even as the ship trembled. "Where will we go now?" she asked softly. "Somewhere they won't follow," he said. "Somewhere they fear." Before she could ask, a warning alarm blared across the dashboard. Another fleet had arrived, larger, deadlier ships stretching across the horizon like a wall of fire. Her breath caught in terror. "This is it," she whispered. "We can't escape this." But Corrin's gaze sharpened. "No," he muttered. This is where we show them humanity's true face. The bride's chest tightened. You'll die, she cried. Corin gave a faint smirk, his scars lit by the glow of enemy weapons. Then I'll die standing, he said, not crawling. The alien fleet fired as one. Beams of light streaked across the void, powerful enough to crush entire cities. The bride closed her eyes, certain it was the end. But then something else happened. From the dark beyond the stars, more lights appeared, not alien lights. Human lights, ships dozens, then hundreds, sliding out of hyperspace. They were not sleek or polished like the alien fleet. They were rough, scarred, built from scraps and desperation. But they were human, and they came roaring into the fire. The bride's eyes widened. Your people? They came, she whispered. Corin's lips curled into the faintest smile. Humans don't leave their own behind, he said. The battle exploded across the stars. Alien cruisers unleashed their fire, but the human ships fought with wild ferocity. Every vessel moved like Corin, reckless but precise. Every strike carried the weight of survival. The Council's fleet wavered, its wall of fire breaking under the storm. Inside the taxi ship, the bride pressed her hands to her chest. Tears burned her eyes as she whispered, all my life I was told humans were nothing, that you were weak, desperate, forgettable. But I see now. It was a lie. Corin's gaze stayed locked on the fight outside, his voice steady and low. They called us weak because they were afraid of what happens when we stop bowing. The tide of battle turned. The alien fleet, larger and stronger, began to break apart under human fire. One by one, their ships fled, retreating into the void. The bride's people, the ones who once ruled over her, were running. The silence that followed was heavier than the battle itself. The stars glowed. With drifting wreckage, the human fleet surrounded them. Battered but alive, Corin leaned back in his seat, finally exhaling. The storm was over for now. The bride turned to him, her voice soft but firm. You gave me freedom, she said. But more than that, you gave me truth. Humans are not what they say. You are stronger, fiercer, braver than any of them will ever admit. Corin finally met her gaze, and for the first time, there was no shadow in his eyes, only quiet resolve. You're free now, he said. What you do with it, that's your choice. Her throat tightened. She could return to her people, try to reclaim her old life, or she could step into the unknown, walk beside the man who had defied empires. Her heart already knew the answer. I'll stay, she whispered. Corin studied her for a long moment, then gave a single nod. Then welcome to humanity's side, he said. A taxi ship turned, its thrusters glowing as it joined the human fleet. For the first time, the bride looked at the stars not as a cage, but as a road without chains, without walls, a road to freedom. And as the galaxy whispered of the runaway bride and the human driver who defied an empire, one truth spread faster than fear. Humans had risen, and the stars would never be the same. Asterisk.